Today, we're diving into the turbulent political career of Kristi Noem. We're going to trace the story of a dramatic rise, a spectacular fall, and then a really fascinating reinvention. It's a wild ride, so let's get right into it. Oof. Imagine hearing that in Washington in early 2026. That's a sitting senator from her own party, and that is a brutal takedown of her leadership. So, to understand how a cabinet career could potentially implode like that, we first have to go back and see how it was built in the first place. So that's the scenario we're exploring here, a tenure of just over a year in one of the most powerful jobs in the country. We're going to follow her incredible rise, imagine a dramatic fall from the cabinet, and then look at a really strategic pivot to a new role on the world stage. Okay, to really get Kristi Noem, you have to start right here. Her entire political identity, her brand, her whole story, it is all rooted in her origin story on the plains of South Dakota. And this isn't just some biographical detail, it is the absolute core of her political appeal. This timeline really tells you everything you need to know. Her life was completely changed in 1994 when her father was tragically killed in a farm accident. Just think about that. At 22 years old, she drops out of college to take over and run the entire family ranch. That story of tragedy, of responsibility, and resilience, well, it becomes the foundation of her entire political brand. So, how does that story from the family ranch turn into a full-blown political career? Well, her climb up the political ladder was incredibly fast. I mean, she went from local politics to the national stage with remarkable speed. And you can really see that trajectory laid out right here. Look at the progression. She starts in the South Dakota House and quickly becomes a leader. Then, it's on to the U.S. House, where she really focuses on her bread and butter, agriculture. Then, of course, the historic win as governor, and in our scenario, the final step is leading Homeland Security. You can see how each move strategically builds on the last one. Now, as governor, this is where she really started to build that reputation as a conservative fighter. And what's so interesting here is that these policies weren't just for South Dakota, they were really designed for a national audience, right? Her hands-off approach to COVID made her a hero to libertarians. Her super strong anti-abortion stance locked in her credentials with evangelicals. And sending her own state's National Guard to the southern border, that was a huge signal of her federal ambitions. So in our projected timeline, her appointment to lead Homeland Security, this should have been the absolute peak of her career. But instead, it quickly becomes this lightning rod for controversy and ultimately the cause of her public downfall. Just 14 months. That is an incredibly short time for a cabinet secretary. In this scenario, her leadership is just hit with a constant stream of operational failures, political scandals, and criticism from both sides of the aisle that would just make her position totally impossible to hold on to. So the key thing to understand here is that it wouldn't be one single issue. It's this cascade of problems. You'd have reports of FEMA relief getting bottlenecked because she insisted on personally signing off on expenditures. Then this bipartisan anger just erupts over the deportation of U.S. military veterans. But the tipping point? A totally disastrous congressional hearing, where she testifies that President Trump himself approved a massive multi-million-dollar DHS ad campaign featuring her. For a lot of people in Washington, that would be the final straw. Okay, so after hearing about all that potential chaos, you might be asking yourself, what is the core of her political talent? I mean, how did she get so far in the first place? Well, it really comes down to a masterclass in branding and an almost unbelievable level of political resilience. Her greatest skill, really, is her ability to bridge these two really powerful identities, which you can see right here, side by side. On the one hand, you've got the rancher. She's tough as nails, making hard decisions, all based on this rural, hands-on authenticity. But on the other hand, she's the enforcer, the uncompromising protector of national security, totally focused on border integrity and state sovereignty. She sells both of these personas at the same time, and for a long time, it worked incredibly well. But nothing, and I mean nothing, illustrates the collision of these two brands better than the now infamous story of her dog Cricket. In her 2024 memoir, she told the story of shooting the puppy, and she framed it as a tough but necessary rancher decision. But for her critics, it just became the symbol of rashness and poor judgment. You can just imagine how that story could haunt a DHS tenure, maybe even being brought up by lawmakers during those hearings. But here's the thing about Kristi Noem. In our hypothetical future, after being pushed out of the cabinet, she doesn't just go away. In this classic display of political resilience, she pivots to a new, very high-profile role. So President Trump could then reassign her to lead this new initiative, the Shield of the Americas.
And this move is kind of brilliant because it lets her leverage that exact same enforcer brand for a mission that's all about dismantling drug cartels and coordinating security with other nations. It's a role that plays directly to her established strengths and keeps her on the world stage just in a different uniform. So her journey, both real and potential, it's just one of the most compelling stories in American politics. From the family ranch to the cabinet, and maybe to a new role as an envoy, it's a story of constant reinvention. And it leaves us with this really crucial question. What does this powerful brand of heartland power, this mix of rural authenticity with hardline policy, what does that mean for the future of American leadership on the world stage?